What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Last Take Sports Podcast.
And today's episode is a little bit different, guys. We are officially on YouTube. This will be the first episode uploaded onto YouTube. So look out for that Last Take Sports Podcast on YouTube. So check us out. Please support us on there. But without further ado, we're going to get into today's episode. And today we will be talking about our Michigan State Spartans, the football team. And, football season's coming up. So we're going to kind of break down the roster, what we think of the team, and how we think that they will do this season. So without further ado, let's get into it. And Henry, I think the biggest question kind of going into this year is the quarterback position. And they have not named a starter, and this is an open competition. It's between Katin Hauser and Noah Kim. So Henry, what are your thoughts on this quarterback little competition they got going on? It seems like Kim is the favorite going into this training camp and off season, but what are your thoughts? And do you think Kim will be and should be the starter? Or do you think Hauser is a good case to become that starter for Michigan State?
So, Andrew, you made a good point about how Noah Kim is at this point in the lead, and I would tend to agree in that case. Basically, all media outlets and Mel Tucker, along with offensive coordinators and passing coaches and all of the other staff, have basically confirmed that at this point, Noah Kim is the leader for the starting quarterback position. With that being said, I would rather see Katin Hauser. I think he's the more talented guy. I think he offers more program upside. And I genuinely believe if he doesn't play, he's going to be out the door December 1st, whenever day the portal opens again. And I think he's a guy you can't really afford to lose. Whereas Noah Kim, there's 18 Noah Kims out there, and you can find another one. I would rather them go with Katin Hauser, but at the end of the day, if Noah Kim proves he's better, I think that's also kind of the way you have to go.
Yeah, and I think Hauser has the higher ceiling. So I think we can both agree on that. Hauser was a top guy coming out of his class in high school, and he just hasn't really gotten the opportunity. Obviously, with Thorne, came off that really special 11-2 season 2 seasons ago, but Thorne obviously had his struggles this past season. But he was still the guy, and Michigan State put their trust in him while he was here. Obviously, Peyton Thorne transferred out, and Noah Kim seems to be the guy. Noah Kim got a little bit of an opportunity last year, and he actually performed pretty well. So I think that's why they're pretty high on him coming into this year, because when he did get the chance, which was a very small chance last year, when Thorne was dealing with a little bit of injuries, I believe, Kim did shine a little bit. So that is some optimism. There is a lot of optimism around Kim, but I would have to agree with you, Henry, with Hauser definitely has the higher ceiling, in my opinion. But if I were to predict, we will be seeing Kim quarterbacking, at least to start the season this fall. But Henry, let's move on to another important skill position there on the offensive end, and that is the running back position. Last year, the running back position didn't really produce that much for Michigan State. They were supposed to. They had high expectations, especially coming off of that season of Kenneth Walker, who just exploded and was one of the best, if not the best player in college football that year. And the running game definitely dropped tremendously, but there is optimism around the position this year. You have Jalen Berger returning, who had a solid year last year. Not exactly what we wanted from him, but solid year. And then also that you got two transfers in Nathan Carter, who I really like, and I know I'm pretty sure you like him a lot too, Henry, and Jaron Mangum. So you got a couple transfers coming in for depth, but you got those, in my opinion, a really nice 1-2 punch in Jalen Berger and Nathan Carter. So Henry, what are your thoughts on this position? Do you think that we're going to get a lot of production out of them, or do you think this will be mostly an air raid offense?
I believe we'll get a decent production. Jalen Berger coming into his second year. I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to talk about here. Quite honestly, I assume it'll be a 1-2 punch with Berger being the one and Nathan Carter being the two, and whichever one kind of takes the lead will probably get the bulk of the carries. But I don't really think anybody else has much of a chance to step into a role in this backfield. I kind of think it's limited to these two guys.
Yeah, and that's why I think the opportunity is there for a guy like Nathan Carter coming in. And that's why it's such a nice addition, is because Jalen Berger didn't really assert himself as that number one back from last year. He was never that guy. So that creates an opportunity. If Nathan Carter wants to come in there, he proves himself as that workhorse. I think there is an opportunity there for him to take that. And if you guys have seen him, he's a monster. He's huge, and he's just a downhill running back. So I really think if he gets that opportunity and takes advantage of it, he could be something special. And that 1-2 punch of him and Berger could be legit. Henry, let's talk about the wide receiver position. This seems like an issue coming up for this year, if not one of the bigger issues on the team. It just doesn't seem like the depth is there. Uh, are there any guys that stick out? I know Trey Mosley is a guy that has really high expectations coming into this year as the wide receiver one for this team. And that has been made clear by everyone that Trey Mosley is the guy coming into this year with Jaden Reed's departure. But do you have any sort of expectations for this group? Or do you think that these running backs will be getting the ball a lot more than usual?
We also lost Keon Coleman. I'm not sure if you mentioned that, which is
Oh,
probably
yeah.
a bigger departure.
Right.
Because we kind of assumed he was going to be back. Trey Mosley will be the one. After that, it's kind of a wash. And if there's a way, I hope they go. I hope they kind of give it to the underclassmen. Right now, there's talks of Christian Fitzpatrick and Montori Foster being the 2 and 3 in terms of receivers. And I would think that may be the worst possible outcome for the receiving group. Go with the young guys. Go with Gates. Go with Jerron Glover. Go with Tyrell Henry. Go with Alante Brown, the transfer you got from Nebraska. Just don't go with these upperclassmen that haven't proved anything outside of Trey Mosley. This team's young. This team needs guys who are going to produce for years to come. And getting a 1-year rental from a guy who hasn't done anything in 3 or 4 years in college is just a waste.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I definitely want to see the younger guys get a shot, but I do think that these other two that you mentioned, Montori Foster and Christian Fitzpatrick, although I don't see them skill wise being that much ahead of the other two, I just think scheme wise they understand the system, the Jay Johnson system, probably a little better with being there a little longer. That's not to say that those guys, the underclassmen, can't step up like Gates, like Glover, like Tyrell Henry. They can't step up and find themselves in starting positions towards middle end of the year. But to start, I probably would be more comfortable going, and I'm sure that's the rationale behind going with those upperclassmen. But I think the key there is definitely Alante Brown. I would say for sure. I mean, he's the make or break guy, I think, in this whole group. He's the transfer coming in from Nebraska this year. I heard speed wise, he's up there with anyone, one of the faster receivers they've seen in a while. So if we can get that deep game going, I know Trey Mosley got hands like no other on this roster. So if you got Trey Mosley and Alante Brown could step up and he could be that speed threat, that deep threat that Jaden Reed was, per se, that Jalen Nailor was a couple years ago for us. So if Alante Brown could step in that role, that could be huge and open up a lot for the offense, and especially the run game opens up the pass game and vice versa. So we can get the pass game going. I'm sure that opens up the run game a lot more too. I don't expect too much from this passing offense going into the year. New quarterback, essentially a whole new receiving core. A lot of these guys have not touched the field much in the last couple of years. So it pretty much seems like we're starting fresh in terms of the entire passing offense. So don't expect too much, honestly, as fans. But I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of these guys can step up. Henry, let's talk about the tight end position. That is technically part of the passing offense, although I don't expect him to take too much of a role. You got Malik Carr, you got Jalen Franklin, the transfer coming in from Wisconsin. And that's about it. Those are the only guys I really expect to touch the field. What are your thoughts on these guys? Malik Carr has shown a little stints, a little flashes in his time here. Was a basketball player as well, but he dropped basketball to focus primarily on football. And do you see him taking that next step this year, or do you think there won't be too much production from that tight end position?
It's Malik Carr bust at this point. None of these other guys, I mean, the Boise State transfer they brought in, Wisconsin transfer, like you mentioned. If it's not Malik Carr, it's absolutely nobody. So this position should be fairly quick to talk about. If anybody else is seeing meaningful playing time on the field, it's either for run only or Malik Carr is hurt or just that bad, and it won't matter.
Yeah, absolutely, Henry. I agree with you there. And Carr, like I said, he was a former basketball player. This guy's an athlete. This guy, when he goes out there, he can make a play, that's for sure. He's great after the catch. So I think you definitely have to give him the shot. He should be the number one guy. And I think getting him as involved as you can in the passing offense is important, very important. Let's talk about the last aspect of this offense, wrapping up the offensive side of the ball is this offensive line. You got a couple key guys returning. You've JD Duplain, and then you got Nick Samak and then Spencer Brown. Those guys will be the leaders of this offensive line. But then you have a couple guys stepping in, Gino Van Demark and then Brandon Baldwin. That should be the starting offensive line going into this season. Those five. Henry, what are your thoughts? I mean, do you think this offensive line will be productive? Because last year we had our issues, and I know he departed. Jared Horst, I think he was honestly a weak spot in the offensive line.
Absolutely.
I thought he was holding left and right. I think he took us out of games a lot more than times where he helped us. So honestly, I wasn't too upset to see him go, although they viewed him as a leader on the offensive line. I just didn't think he was that good. Do you think this offensive line will have less weak points? Or do you think that they will struggle as they did, I believe, last year where they weren't too great?
So I'll start with your point about the starters. I assume that'll probably be the starting lineup, but
Yeah,
I
you can't guarantee anything, but those should be the guys. And I think I
I
would agree with that.
I think they're gonna play 7 or 8 guys though. Like I assume Ethan Boyd probably gets some run at tackle,
Yeah.
as well as Keyshawn Blackstock. I mean, like you said, Brandon Baldwin probably could move inside as well and play some guard. Samac's probably the only center, but he hasn't been practicing, so I don't know if he's hurt or not. Um, Honestly, the line was bad last year. I expect it to probably be pretty bad again. The penalties will probably be cut down, but overall production from the line, I expect it to be, quite frankly, bad.
Yeah. And the penalties were just awful last year. It would take us out of so many games. So as long as they can cut those down, I think it will things will improve. But that's also part of the reason why the running game couldn't get going. I mean, the line just wasn't giving a good push. And you have to credit the line for running back success and success in the running game. And I just don't think the line was doing that for those guys last year. So maybe with an improved line, you'll see the running game improve as well. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, I will say I think this is our strongest point on the team in the front seven. I think the front seven is the strongest point, an aspect of this team. You have Chris Bogle, and then you have I'm gonna butcher this name, so please don't get mad at me for this, but Tumisi Adelaide.
Tunmise Adelaide. That's how
All
I
right.
pronounce it.
I try my best, guys.
But
That's a hard
MSU
one.
fans know who you're talking about.
Yeah, that was a hard one though. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look him up. Texas A&M transfer. The guy's a monster.
He's free.
Great addition. Great addition to this defensive line. So you got those guys on the edge, Bogle and him. And then on the inside, you're gonna have Derek Harmon and Simeon Barlow. And Barlow especially, he's a monster. Monster. So and then when the finishing up the front seven, you're gonna have Jacoby Windman, Cal Halliday, and probably Darius Snow, right?
Yeah, I'd assume so. Maverick Hansen will get, because especially on the inside, it's for Michigan State over the past couple of years, and basically any defensive line, they tend to play at least 3 guys. Maverick Hansen will be part of that. I'm interested to see who, because they kind of like to rotate. Any defensive line will, especially interior. Maverick Hansen will play plenty. Aaron Brule will probably see some time, both at linebacker and on the edge defensive line. Avery Dunn as well. And after that, I'm interested to kind of see who takes over that 4th interior defensive lineman spot. That's an interesting scenario we have to look at. But Windman, Cal Halliday, Darius Snow, with all of those guys, that's probably the strength of this team, the front seven.
It's got to be the front seven. Yeah. And the pass rushing will be unreal. I think Windman is going to just have an absolute nuts year.
He's probably going to play linebacker, though.
You don't think he'll be coming off the edge at all? I mean, last
I think they'll send him on blitzes, but I'm pretty sure he's playing like linebacker, not like outside linebacker as
yeah,
a
last
pass
playing
rusher.
more of like an edge spot, an edge
Yeah, they're
rusher.
playing more like a 4-3, whereas in like
He's going to be a lot more
he's going to be coverage.
apps, yeah, and coverage stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, last year, I mean, we saw it before. Obviously, unfortunately, he got suspended through his involvement in the brawl against the Michigan Wolverines after that game. But Windman was one of the best edge rushers in college football.
Mhm.
Seriously, I mean, you could
Yeah,
look up. He was
absolutely.
he's one of the best guys. So he I'm sure he's coming, and he was gonna 100% gonna get drafted if he did not have that involvement, unfortunately, in that extracurricular activity after the game. But if he was going to get drafted if he did not get suspended. So he's coming back. This is his prove it year. This is his make or break year. So I expect him to take advantage of that, be determined enough to take off this year. Halliday came off a really strong year during that 11-2 season. And then he had a good year last year, but the team as a whole underperformed. And I
He
think that
struggles in pass coverage. Like he's a two down linebacker. He can't cover, which is the biggest problem for this entire team, as we'll probably get into next when we talk about the secondary. But he can't cover.
and the secondary is obviously the weakness of this team, but we'll get there. And so Halliday's the man. He's one of the best tacklers, if not the best tackler in the Big Ten. And like I said, off
Probably the
the
best
edge,
player on this team.
for sure. Yeah, and then off the edge, you're going to get that pass rushing, like I said. And then in the interior, I mean, I mentioned him a little. Barlow, the guy's huge. No one's getting past Barlow.
Simeon Barrow, not Barlow.
Sorry,
No, you're
sorry.
good.
It appears that way, you
It's all
know.
right. It's all right. It's all right. And everybody knows what you're talking about. That dude's going to get drafted for sure. Absolutely.
Right. One of the best interior guys, I would say.
Only 10 last year.
Yeah, and I would say top 25 interior player in the country. I would go that far.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and Harmon's a pretty big guy too. So top or the front seven, that will be the best part of this team. Henry, I don't know if you have much more to add about them. I feel like we covered that. But I do want to talk about the secondary. We'll get into that. It's looking rough. You're gonna have Jaden Mangum. He'll probably be the best part of that secondary.
That's a stretch. He's bad too. Charles.
Charles Brantley, Charles Brantley entered the transfer portal and we got him back.
He's the only bright spot. Everybody else is bad. Like, let's just
I think
no
Mangum,
shots to Dylan Tatum, friend of the podcast.
Dylan Tatum had him on, yeah, a couple, what was it, a year, 2 years ago? About
I believe so. Before he was committed to state, but at this point, he's just another guy, and he's not going to be a difference maker.
yeah, I think he'll play safety, right? And he's a little undersized. That's the issue. I feel like
He's not that fast.
not that fast. Then you're gonna have Mangum, like I said. I believe didn't he start out as a corner and then they're moving him to safety, or was he
No, they moved him to safety, I think.
in the safety? There's a lot of questions in this group. We
It's
kind
just
of knew. We got Samar Melvin transfer. I think he could be something. But besides that, Malik Spencer, I think could be a breakout guy possibly.
Yeah.
If it's up. I like Malik Spencer. You got Kimbrough. He's a vet.
we'll stop there. He's a vet.
Yeah, that's about all I have to say about Chester Kimbrough. He's a veteran. He should know the system.
Should he?
He should know the system. It's been
Does
broken.
he? Like, that's the question.
A broken system, but I think he knows it because
I'm not sure.
he still might be working on that. Chester Kimbrough.
Yeah.
And then Angelo Gross. I think me and Henry talked about him before we started recording. I think if you watch his very few highlights, he he hits pretty hard.
I mean, like, there's like 3 highlights.
Yeah, I know there's not many, but if you watch him in game, he attacks the ball and he when it's near him, and because sometimes he in coverage they just find ways right around him, and then but if when the ball is near him, he knows how to hunt it down and hit pretty hard. I'm a fan of Angelo Gross in terms of his tackling and attacking the ball. Coverage, not so much. I feel terrible just essentially crapping on this entire secondary, but that's
They
about all
crap
you.
on themselves. They're bad. It's not like you're not hurting anybody's feelings.
They don't give you much reason to hype them up at all.
Just talk about kickers and punters. Jeez.
Yeah. So with that being said, we'll move on to we'll move on to that special teams. And if you watch Michigan State closely last year, you would know that kicking was probably in special teams was, besides Bryce Behringer, who was the best. I would say the best
Higher the
punter.
number
Yeah, he
in
was the best
99 in the Raptors.
punter last year in college football. Not only the Big Ten, but in college football. But besides that, there was no bright spots. I guess returning a little bit, kicking.
Jaden Reed had a few holding returned
I'm
touchdowns.
saying, but besides that, the point I'm getting at is the kicking was brutal. The kicking was awful.
We lost a bowl game because of it.
Yeah, it was the Indiana game where
It was a
we were
25. It was a PAT.
yeah we were lined up for a 20-some yarder, and he just to win.
Mhm.
Was it game or was it overtime?
It was that him missing it sent it to overtime.
Yeah, and we ended up losing in
I
overtime.
mean, of course.
It was just so classic of the Spartans last year. Um, Kicking was just awful though, is what I'm getting at. And we did get a transfer from the University of North Carolina, Jonathan Kim. I honestly, if I'm being completely honest, I don't know too much about him, but the fact that he didn't have the job at North Carolina and that he had to transfer out, and with Michigan State being so desperate, can't imagine the guy's lights out. Just
No,
based
definitely not.
facts, and as a State fan, I wouldn't expect him to be. But anything could be better than last year, is what we're getting at.
But
So
the punting's going to be worse.
punting's going to be a lot worse. Uh, we're going to see how that goes. I'm not really sure who's set up to be the punter at
Who
this moment.
knows? Who knows? Who cares?
Whoever it is, there will be no Bryce Behringer.
Yeah, that could be interesting. But I think it's time to get into the record predictions.
Right. We'll move into the record predictions right now. We're gonna run down the schedule. We're gonna go. Or should we go game by game, Henry, or do you want to go?
But give it all, and then we can talk about a few.
Yeah. All right. So, for me, I'm gonna go first. You have Central Michigan to lead off the season at home. I'm gonna go 1-0 here, just based off talent. I think it says for itself. And then you have Richmond at home. Again, it's one of those games, non-conference games, pay to play. And I'm gonna go 2-0.
We might lose, so
Yeah, you never know. But you know what? We're optimistic for this year. You know, they did say that
optimistic.
Jay Johnson said that this offense is the most loaded he's felt it's been in his tenure at
Really?
Michigan, and that he did come out and say that. Even that includes his 11-2 Spartan team.
Okay.
But he said maybe not the most talented, but he said the most depth. We definitely have the most depth.
Great.
So you know what?
You can only put 11 on the field.
They have to prove it 100%. So we'll see. Anyway, maintaining this track this season. You've been at home, and this was a home and home game last year. Obviously, we had high expectations, and then we went in there and just got beat down. And that kind of set the tone for the season. I honestly that game, and that's where I think it all went to like a downhill spiral, just right into the ground. Anyway, reminiscing on last year's horrible season, I see this as a loss. Washington's going to be very good this year, competing in the Pac-12, and they have one of the best quarterbacks in Michael Penix Jr. In the country. So expect that to be a loss. Would be a great win though at home, but I gotta say 2-1 at that point. Have Maryland at home again. It's a nice 4-game home stretch to start the season. I think we bounce back and get a win here. This game could really go either way. Maryland's a good team. They will pick up some wins, definitely compete for a bowl in the Big Ten, a bowl game there. But I got it as a win, and I think Michigan State gets the job done at home. If it was on the road, I would maybe say that would be a loss, but with it being at home, I like our chances against Maryland 3-1 there. Then you go against Iowa on the road. Kinnick, it's hard to win there regardless, and Iowa's going to have a really good team there, and I think they have a good chance at winning that Big Ten West, especially with having a quarterback who can throw the ball now. And Cade McNamara, they haven't had a quarterback who's been able to throw the ball the past couple of years. That passing offense has been nothing. So I think Iowa gets the job done against Michigan State at home. So I'm going to go 3-2 there, and then we move on to Rutgers on the road. Michigan State's had Rutgers number in the past. They're really nothing special this year. We're going to go win there on the road. So 4-2, come back at home against Michigan. Michigan's one, and I hate to say it, but you can't deny it. They're one of the best teams in the country, and they're pretty much they have Michigan State at almost every spot except maybe the front seven, but yet they have one of the best offensive lines in the country to combat that. So really, I think Michigan State gets beat there in almost every position, but you never know. I don't hate an upset there. In prime time at Spartan Stadium, anything could happen. The crowd will be with them. And I have them coming off a win against Rutgers, so they will be somewhat hot coming off that win. Maybe it happens. I don't see it. So I have us at 4-3, and then we travel on the road against Minnesota. I see that as a loss. Minnesota will be one of those top teams in the Big Ten West, and I just don't see Michigan State being able to pull that off on the road. I have them at 4-4 at that point. We have Nebraska at home. With that being a home game, I have it being a win. I think Nebraska will be improved this year, but I feel like we say that every year, and they're just never that good. But I do expect it to be a little better this year. But with that being said, I still have Michigan State getting that win against them at home. And you travel on the road against one of the best teams in the country, Ohio State. They do have a little bit of a quarterback question going on there, but I do have Michigan State losing that game. Then you have Indiana on the road. I have Michigan State winning that game. Indiana shouldn't be anything too special this year. Michigan State will be better than them in almost every aspect of the game. So I have them at 6-5 currently, eligible for a bowl. And with that being said, their game against Penn State to wrap up the season at home will be a loss. I think Penn State will make a good case to be the best team in the Big Ten East. I think they have a really good shot at contending there. I would almost even put them ahead of Ohio State. But the only reason why I view that Ohio State game as tougher is that Ohio State game is in the shoe compared to the Penn State game being at Spartan Stadium, or actually at Ford Field. I correct myself. That game will be being played at Ford Field. Nonetheless, still a home game. And I have them as losses. So it's irrelevant. Michigan State's finishing 6-6. No real upsets here for the Spartans this year, in my opinion. Henry, let me know where you disagree and your differences in your predictions.
So I'm going to go a little quicker here, Andrew. I think we probably are cutting on the edge of our time here. Start 2-0, Central, Richmond, self-explanatory. They're just going to win those two games. Come back, stay at home, play Washington. I think Washington's simply the better team. I think they're just going to get destroyed in the pass game and fall at 2-1. Maryland's kind of the same thing, except they're just worse at everything compared to Washington. I think Michigan State finds a way, doesn't let the season spiral like last year. Like after they came back from the Washington game, they lost like 38-0 to Minnesota. I think they come back at home and beat Maryland. Go to Iowa. That's a tough place to play. They have a quarterback who's not Spencer Petras and a revamped offensive system that includes the exact same offensive scheme as last year, just different players. I still think it's going to be too hard to win. They're going to fall 3-2. Rutgers is Rutgers. We're not going to lose to Rutgers. If we lose to Rutgers, we'll have a different chat on this podcast in about 2 months. So let's move on to the game of the year. Michigan State under the lights. As Mike Valenti has said numerous times to Michigan fans, don't bring your kids. This game is going to be hostile. This game is going to be,
The sales of alcohol now
yeah,
and
this game is going to be special.
sale of alcohol in college stadiums. So now things might get even more rowdy than you might expect. Continue, Henry.
Yeah, we're going to win this game. Like you said, Michigan State is worse at literally every position, but we're just not going to lose to Michigan at home under the lights. I'm sorry, like Michigan, I probably think is one of the best teams in the country. We'll talk about that later when we get into our Big Ten predictions. But
Especially in rivalry games, what I do have to say quickly is really talent goes out the window. In rivalry games, it's who shows up that day or that night. In this case, it's going to be a primetime game under the lights in Spartan Stadium. Things are going to be rowdy with the crowd on their side. I said it. I think there's a chance of an upset here. And emphasizing my point, talent really goes out the window in rivalry games, and it's just who will show up that night. And I think the Spartans, I don't hate that upset prediction there. I think the Spartans have a good shot at showing up and avenging their loss last year in the big house and getting a win and taking Bunyan back in Spartan Stadium under the lights.
yeah, I am sure, Andrew, that they will show up and be there. We'll see how much they show up. But moving on to Minnesota, that's probably a letdown game. Like that's the definition of a letdown game, even though it's on the road and a tough place to play. They're going to lose that game. Nebraska is again bad, and Michigan State will find a way to beat them at home. Moving on to Ohio State, we'll move past that one. And then at this point, I believe we are 6-4. Yeah, 6-4 at this point, according to my predictions. Go on the road to Indiana. Indiana is bad. Like again, it's another Rutgers team. Unfortunately, we catch Rutgers and Indiana on the road, which will make the games a little harder. But at this point in the season, there may be like 8 fans still watching Indiana football. They'll be excited for basketball. And again, their 8 center lineup that they're going to play this year. And we'll talk more about Indiana basketball at some point down the road. But I think we win this one. And then our last game of the season at Ford Field, Penn State's going to be really good this year. And I think that they could be competing for a playoff spot at this point. And I think they're going to just run us out of the
They're
building.
good, Henry.
Yeah.
I think there's a good chance they would, like I said, win the Big Ten East. I think not a lot of people are talking about.
Don't give away all your predictions.
Right, because we will be talking conference by conference soon and talking about who we think conference winners will be and college football playoffs, New Year's Six, stuff like that. I just do want to say, though, quickly about Penn State, though, is that I know a lot of people always talk about Michigan and Ohio State, but really to win the Big Ten East. But really watch out for Penn State. They're sleepers, and people will start opening their eyes soon.
Yeah, and if everybody was listening, I had Michigan State finishing 7-5. We'll get to a bowl game. It's not the Quick Lane Bowl. We will avoid playing in the MAC Bowl and playing a second straight game at Ford Field. Thank God. Probably end up playing in like the Holiday Bowl or the Pinstripe Bowl. Pinstripe Bowl is elite. I love watching us play teams like Wake Forest every single year in that game. So bring it on. But
Good luck. So we win. We get the job done. Yeah, we might play the Washington States of the world, but you know what? We win. We win the games.
Yeah, bowl game Warriors.
The team that can't really say that in the University of Michigan, and in Michigan they don't win in these quote unquote postseason games. They don't win them. They don't. Yeah. So what we can say
that's right. But Andrew, if you don't have anything else to say, I don't. I think this would be a great time to wrap up today's podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, give this a video a like, comment, subscribe to the channel.
Please just let us know. You know, you can talk in the comments. Just say what you think about it.
Any interactions
with us. We would love to talk to you guys. You know, love to hear what you think.
Exactly. Even if we know you, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's some engagement. But if you're listening on any podcast outlet, whether that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, I think this would be a great time to wrap up today's podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, download this podcast, and we'll see you guys next time on the Last Take Sports Podcast.